Have you ever heard the legend of the Bunny Man? It's an innocent name, isn't it? You might think of it as a children's story, something cute and harmless. But the truth about the Bunny Man is much, much darker. And if you stick with me until the end, perhaps I can show you that this creature still lurks on the edge of our reality, watching, waiting. Let me take you to Fairfax County, Virginia, in the 1970s. Local teenagers were the first to talk about a man dressed in a strange costume. Yes, a bunny costume. But what they encountered was nothing they had ever encountered before. Picture it. A bridge, isolated and quiet, known as the Colchester Overpass. It was late one Halloween night, when two young lovers parked there hoping for some privacy. And that's when they first heard it. The sound of something scraping against metal. They looked up, and there it was. Standing right next to their car, a huge figure disguised in a grotesque bunny suit, holding a bloody axe. It didn't speak. It just stood there, watching, waiting, until the screams of a young couple finally sent them running, tires squealing as they tore into the night. But when they looked back, they saw it silhouetted in the moonlight, motionless, as if it were chained to the spot. And the next morning, they found the remains of small animals strewn across the bridge, their bodies broken, almost ritualistically arranged. There were more sightings over the years. Campers, hikers, even families driving through late at night. They all reported the same figure, its face obscured, its shadow always watching, and it was never clear whether it was human or something else entirely. Some people tried to explain it away as a joke, or as someone crazy, but to those who encountered him, his presence felt like something ancient, something beyond our understanding. They say you could feel his eyes watching you, even after you were gone, and for some, he followed them home. The most chilling encounter? A group of local teenagers went there looking for a thrill. At first, they laughed about it, shouting, teasing the Rabbit Man. But as the night grew colder and the sounds of the forest faded, they realized something was wrong. Suddenly, one of them saw him, standing on the bridge, his axe dripping. The others laughed until they realized their friend had gone silent, his eyes fixed on something in the dark. They say they ran that night, each of them sensing they were being pursued. But by the time they reached safety, one of them was gone. The police searched for days, but all they found were some torn pieces of fabric caught on the bridge, and something else, a lone rabbit's foot, nailed to a tree, as if left as a warning. You see, legends like the Rabbit Man don't just go away. They live on, fueled by fear and curiosity. And if you ever find yourself in Fairfax County, alone by a bridge at night, you might catch a glimpse of him, a shadow with empty eyes, waiting for someone to come too close. But be careful. Not everyone who searches for the Rabbit Man comes back. So if you're brave enough, get close, lean in, and remember, even the most innocent-sounding legends have teeth. And once you meet him, you can never escape his watchful gaze. If you've made it this far, brave soul, perhaps you'll dare to venture further into the world of true horror. My channel features stories of fear, stories far more disturbing than what you see on screen. Until next time, sleep tight if you can. You have come, brave soul, or perhaps foolish, to seek out stories from the darkest corners of the human mind. Tonight, we will travel far north, into the icy forests where few dare to tread, where an ancient spirit is said to dwell, a creature known by a name that sends chills down one's spine, the Wendigo. But let me warn you, This story is not for the faint of heart. Stay to the end if you dare, for there are truths about the Wendigo that even the hardiest souls cannot bear to bear. This story begins in a small, isolated village on the edge of a dark forest, shrouded in eternal winter. The villagers knew the rules. Never stray too far from home, especially when the snow falls heavily and the air turns cold, for that is when the Wendigo awakens, hungry and restless. One night, a young man from the village, burdened with hunger and despair, broke the rule. He set out into the forest, hoping to find food for his starving family. He never returned. Days passed, then weeks, until finally the villagers found him, or at least what was left of him. His eyes, once familiar, were hollow. His skin stretched tight over his bones, his lips torn and bloody, as if he had chewed on them in his madness. And worst of all, he carried with him a strange, rancid smell that clung to him like a curse. They said he had eaten something, or someone. His family was terrified, for they knew the signs. He had become possessed, turned into a Wendigo. The spirit of winter had taken him, turning him into a creature with an insatiable hunger for flesh. His humanity was gone, replaced by an insatiable desire that would leave a bloody trail across the village. One by one, the villagers began to disappear, leaving only shattered bones and empty huts. They tried to run, but wherever they went, the Wendigo was there, always just out of sight, watching from the shadows. The survivors knew they were being hunted, as if their scent was calling to the creature, drawing it closer, inch by inch. He stands silent for a while, the forest around him dead silent, and that's where the story takes a turn. You see, this is not just a story about a cursed man. The Wendigo is not just a beast or a spirit. It is a reflection of something deeper, a disease that grows in the hearts of the desperate, feeding on fear, hunger, loneliness. Anyone, given the right circumstances, can become a Wendigo. Yes, even you. So when you find yourself alone, perhaps in the dead of winter, remember this story. Remember that the Wendigo is not just a creature lurking in the woods, but a shadow inside each of us, waiting for the moment when we are at our weakest to emerge. Until next time, keep your wits about you and be careful where you step. And if you want to learn more dark truths and cursed creatures, stay with me, for this journey has only just begun. Many people love forest walks. Fresh air, the whisper of leaves in the wind, bright rays of the sun. Who wouldn't like that, you ask? And I'll answer, me. Horror grips me every time I smell pine in the air. My panic fear of the forest is connected with one incident that I had to endure many years ago. When I was at school, my dad took me to my grandmother's in the village every summer vacation. My grandmother had chickens, geese, a cow, and my favorite gray horse, Sakarox. The village was on the outskirts. The road there took a long time. Grandma allowed me to ride in the forest, with strict orders not to gallop into the thicket. Dad, worried about me, insisted that I stop this activity. They say I bored the horse with constant rides, but Grandma always stood up for me and said that it was even good for Sakarock. She herself could no longer provide the young and frisky horse with the necessary exercise, and therefore approved of my walks. Everything was fine until I turned 14. Then I considered myself old enough, broke my grandmother's prohibition for the first time, and went for a walk in the thicket of the forest. On that fateful day, on which my troubles began, I felt a special surge of strength. I had no desire to ride around the village for the 100th time in a row. So I saddled Sakarock and went to explore the unknown part of the forest. Sakharok constantly straightened his ears and nervously inhaled the air, as if he sensed something very bad nearby. I did not attach any importance to this, and thought that the horse was simply worried because he had ended up in an unfamiliar place. With each passing minute, we went deeper and deeper into the thicket. It seemed like a forest. The sun was still there, but I was still overcome by a nagging feeling of anxiety, and I finally understood what was going on. The forest was deathly silent. It was as if all sounds had been turned off on command. I had a distinct feeling that we were being watched. Suddenly, I heard a loud clicking sound. I couldn't determine where exactly it was coming from. The sound seemed to be coming from all sides at once. I became truly scared. I pulled the reins to the side to turn Sakharok and gallop home as quickly as possible, away from this nightmare. But the horse didn't listen. Sakharok nervously stamped his hooves. Every muscle in his body was tense, like a taut bowstring. He straightened his ears and stared somewhere deep into the forest. I followed his gaze. At first, I saw only an impenetrable thicket, but then I looked closer and saw something that made my blood run cold. A deathly pale, bald creature was hiding on all fours behind one of the fir trees. Considering how much it bent its knees and elbows, I can say that it was very tall. If the creature had straightened up, its height would have been at least 2 meters, although it was unlikely that it could have stood on its feet at all, because its feet were very rounded. The creature's knees were turned in the opposite direction, like those of animals. Its arms and fingers seemed unnaturally long to me. Thick fur grew on the feet and palms of the creature. Even then, it seemed strange to me that, despite the complete calm, this fur was swaying, and in different directions. The creature leaned on its fists like a gorilla and looked at us. Its facial features were only vaguely reminiscent of human ones. Black eyes, a wide mouth, and 2 nostrils without a nose. It did not move. It just sat motionless behind the tree and looked at us. Suddenly, Sugar whinnied, turned sharply, and rushed back to the house at full gallop. While we were galloping, I heard clicking sounds behind us, but no one was chasing us. I collected all the branches from the trees with my face, but I did not care. When we arrived home, I decided not to say anything to my grandmother, took Sugar to the stall, and gave him something to eat. Evening came. It was time to go to bed. I went to the window to close the curtains and was stunned. Despite the pitch darkness, I still managed to make out that creature. It again looked at me stupidly, but was not going to approach. I was afraid that this creature would approach the house now, but I didn't hear any footsteps. About 20 minutes passed. I carefully got up and looked out the window. The creature was still sitting and looking at me, horrified. I sank to the floor, wondering what to do. In the end, I didn't notice how I fell asleep right on the carpet under the window. In the morning, I woke up, and the first thing I did was look out the window. There was no one there. I sighed with relief, changed my clothes, and went to the kitchen to the smell of fresh pies. At breakfast, I realized that I had caught a chill from sleeping on the cold floor. I had a slight fever, a cough, and a runny nose. Horseback riding was out of the question, and, frankly, I was glad about it. I was peacefully basking in the sun, and the devil made me look towards the forest. Behind the trees, that creature was sitting motionless again and staring at me. I was about to panic when suddenly a thought occurred to me. It wasn't attacking me. It was just looking. Maybe screw it. Let it stare. It could have killed me a bunch of times already, but it didn't, so it didn't need it. I pretended that the creature didn't exist and started living as before. From that day on, I kept seeing this creature here and there. Things lasted like this until August, and then the creature suddenly stopped visiting me. The next day, my dad came and took me to the city. A week later, my tearful grandmother called me and said that Sakharok had died. My heart was broken, and in February, my grandmother died of a stroke. Since then, I haven't been to the village for many years. During my studies at the university, it became deserted. The residents moved to the nearest cities, leaving their homes at the mercy of nature. When I turned 26, I succumbed to memories and returned to the village for a day. In 1 second, the nightmare of the past returned to me with renewed vigor. The memories struck me with an electric shock. In the mirror, I saw this white, bald freak looking at me. He opened his huge mouth, full of long, sharp teeth, and made that same clicking sound. Then he rushed towards me. I floored the gas pedal, skidded for a couple of seconds, and sped away from there along an old country road. Suddenly, the freak jumped on the trunk of the car and tried to break the rear window. Luckily for me, a sharp turn appeared in front of me. I have no idea how I managed to perform such a maneuver and miraculously not fly off the road, but I achieved my goal. The creature flew off the car. It tried to catch up with me, but the car reached maximum speed, and I drove away from there. I returned home without incident. Since then, I've not returned to the village. The creatures do not show themselves in any way. Apparently, they remained there in the forest. Although everything ended well, I still shudder at any suggestion to go for a walk in the forest or go out for a barbecue. Friends do not understand my fear, but they do not need to know anything. I remember the horror that I had to endure too well, and I do not want it to be repeated.